Diploma in
We are live now, so please take your seats.
Queensland.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to this council meeting. We've got Michael Deaker on Zoom. Nice to have you all here. Moving through, so there are no other apologies, correct? So moving through to the public forum. We have two requests to speak at the public forum today, and they'll both be joining us via Zoom. First, we have.
Before we do that, can we order the agenda, please? You're making an item.
Yes, but it's the next. It was the next item. I'm just going to deal with it after the public forum. That was all. Yep. Item 3. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Not Alan now.
Yes, Alan Saville. And Alan is with us today to speak on behalf of the New Zealand Tramways Union Dunedin branch about funding of bus drivers' wages. Are you with us, Alan? Good morning, Alan.
Does he know his mic is in the hall?
Yes, he's in the way.
Didn't ask him to unmute.
Could you please unmute Alan?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Alan, welcome aboard. Thank you for being with us today. You're here to speak about funding of bus drivers' wages. So we're here to listen. You've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair, councillors and all others in attendance. This is all new to me, so bear with me, please. I'm Alan Saville. I'm president of the Dunedin Tramways Union, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I'm here to express our disappointment at the non-payment of the living wage to the bus drivers of Otago. Yeah, that's right. We are still not receiving the living wage. We do not know why. We do know that the excuse is not time. Now, so many months have passed. Council first approved the payment of living wage in July 2020, 18 months ago. And we have the first instalment, albeit many months late, but thank you for that. In September, the September continuation was signalled by the government in July this year. That's 5 months ago. So time surely cannot be the excuse. We know it isn't COVID. Bus drivers fronted every day through all levels. That's not COVID. We do not believe it is unfamiliarity, complexity, or subject inexperience. As I've said, this continuation of payment was signalled in July, well before the negotiations for that initial contract variation were signed off. The IRC has been through this process before. It's not new. Our audit team have assured us neither is it complex. We have also been told it is not the other contributing party, Wakatibu Land Transport. Land Transport have assured us that the money is available to all councils, but as yet has not been uplifted by the ORC, and that they have no explanation for why we are not being paid the living wage as promised. We have been told, quote, maybe by Christmas, unquote. So it's come to this. All our hopes rest on Santa. Santa and Rudolph to the rescue. Maybe. Paying the living wage to a group of essential worker constituents presented a great opportunity for the ORC. A celebration of doing the right thing by recognising and valuing a vital cog in the operation of this region. An opportunity to demonstrate that council can function in a multi-stakeholder environment that is now the modern norm. But it hasn't, an opportunity squandered. It's turned into a long, drawn-out battle for us, a battle that's taken a huge financial and emotional toll on our drivers and their families. We're constantly fighting to receive wages months after due date. We're never receiving the current rate on time, and always with the threat of it being withdrawn in the future. This is our Christmas, councillors. What's your Christmas looking like? Will your pay rise be through by then? So what started as a simple offer of fairness is turning into a huge, embarrassing debacle. So councillors, on behalf of all the bus drivers in the region, please resolve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Could you just explain, you mentioned about a first instalment. Can you just elaborate on what you meant by that comment?
Yeah, certainly. Over these, where we go, if we go back to July 2020, when council first agreed to it, since then, the living wage there have been different rates for the living wage. It goes up each September, or 1st of September. So since July 2020, there was an increase in rate then. There was another one on the 1st of September 21. So we have been paid the living wage up to September 2021. And that is the current rate that we are getting at the moment, which is $20.10. What we are not receiving is the current living wage, which is $22.75.
Thanks for the clarification, Alan. I'm going to go firstly to Gavin Palmer, who is the General Manager of Operations.
Gary.
Oh, sorry, Gary Maloney, Transport Manager. Gary, would you like to come up to the table? Or to a microphone.
Should we be doing this?
No. Well, all I want is that to allow Gary to respond to some of the comments from Alan, just so we're completely up to speed with where the situation's at from our perspective. Gary.
Thank you, Chairman. You may recall. You may recall that when you made the decision on paying the $22.75, which is the 1st of September 21 value, so a couple of months ago, that was conditional on getting Wakatibu co-investment. That requires a decision on their part. That is going through their delegation committee today. If they endorse that, it then goes to their CFO for approval, and that may take another week. So that's basically where stuff has got. In terms of the first instalment, yes, that related to living wage values back to July last year, that have been paid up to the previous living wage value, which was $22.10. The current one at the moment is $22.75, and as I say, that's currently with the agency to approve.
So just for clarity, Wakatibu haven't quite completed the process to tick off the September and beyond period.
So the agency needed to know what the value of that was, because their approval in the National Land Transport Program excluded that, and the process they're following around the country with those councils that are moving to that value is to do something called a cost scope adjustment, which is basically regional council, how much extra is the cost of this thing, and then we can work out our share and approve that. It wasn't a decision by the agency to approve the living wage, it was central government requiring the agency to then come up with a way to do that.
Okay, thank you for the clarity. This is a question for Alan.
It's a question for our submitter.
Yes, Alan, yep.
Alan, this is share your frustration, mate. Now you've heard that, does that give you some indication that the ORC have the intent, or do you just think, bugger off, why aren't you paying us direct? Why do you have to go to Wellington?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. We understand that there are process and authorities and things have to be signed off. No, we certainly appreciate that. I think what's frustrating for us is that this was first signalled back in July, and both government and GoBus told us about that, and we would sort of question then, when was anything put in place? You know, was it just left until months later before it was done, or did they get the ball rolling straight away? And I guess that's our frustration, that it's just taken so long. We appreciate that ORC has now gone to the government, but that was only last week, was it? So we've had from July to December to get it there. So I guess that's our frustration, that, you know, it's just the living wage comes out on the 1st of September each year, and it is to keep pace with the cost of living. Now, if you're not going to get that cost of living for 4 or 5 months later, for that period, you've been behind the 8 ball. Whenever you've gone to Pack and Save or done your shopping, you've been those few dollars short. I guess that's our situation, guys. Yeah.
Yep. No, thank you. That's nice and clear. And you've had the update from Gary, so it sounds like we're right on the brink of having that money approved by Wakatibu, and then obviously it filters down through the contracted or through the contractors that provide the services, and then it filters to the drivers. Kate,
Given the time of year.
question for Alan.
Yeah, well, it's actually a question. You've just given an indication that of the time frame of something might happen before Christmas, and I think Gary did. I'm really concerned that even if this is signed off by the CFO at Wakatibu, it won't necessarily trickle down. It may require us to pay the contractor first. I don't know, but I just understanding that process, because I don't want to give any indication that it may be coming soon if it isn't going to.
Okay, so
I think we need to be really clear about that, and I don't know if now is the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So can I leave it that Gary will liaise with Alan to keep him informed about the time frame, because I wouldn't want us to try and pick and choose here right now or put staff on the spot. So I think that if we just allow Gary to keep in touch, and obviously that's probably the way to handle. I'd prefer for it to be handled.
Very, very happy as long as we instruct. Yeah, it's clear that is to be told.
Are you okay with that, Alan?
Yep, that's fine. We will tell our staff it is coming, but yeah, don't get their hopes up for Christmas.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, councillors.
Thank you, Alan. Cheers for that. Thank you.
Andrew, can I ask, when those conversations take place, can governance be informed as well too, please? Because these are our constituents, and I must be approached on this a number of times. And so I want to know what's going on as well. And so I want to make sure that any progress on this, we are automatically informed as well.
Evan, you comfortable with that?
Yes, I am. I'm also very happy to give you a detailed description of the process from the time you made your decision to demonstrate to you the complexity of this process and the fact that staff have worked on this continually over that period on an issue in which we're not the only decision maker. I think you need to understand that, including what we've been telling other parties.
Thank you.
That'd be great.
Moving on to Alistair Morrison, Chairperson of the Waikatibу Coast Community Board.
Thank you, Ellen. That's great.
Oh, I thought we'd already done.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He did really well.
I'm also very happy to give.
So Alistair's here now. I think the screen is frozen.
Oh, no.
It's
So Alistair should be
it's
there.
Alistair, you with us, Alistair?
Yes, hello, good morning.
Welcome, Alistair. So we've got Alistair Morrison from the Waikatibu Coast Community Board. You're here to talk to us about public transport on the North Coast.
Indeed I am. So Hello, good morning.
5
Thank
minutes.
you. What? Pardon?
You've got 5 minutes, Alistair, so all
Oh,
yours.
I know. Been doing this for many years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. 5 minutes is not a lot of time, so I will get started. I wish to speak about item 7.3 on your agenda, and in particular, pages 31 to 34 of that report. And this relates to the bus service on what you call Route 1 and what we call the North Coast Bus Service. In submissions earlier this year to the Otago Southland Transport Plan, the Public Transport Plan, and to your LTP, I clearly outlined how inadequate the current bus service is, with not enough services during the week, no evening services, and nothing at all at the weekends. This does not meet with the stated aspirations in your LTP to improve public transport services. We represent the communities of Waitati, Doctors Point, Evansdale, Warrington, Seacliff, Karetani, Waikouaiti, and surrounding rural areas. All of these areas have growing populations. Your LTP talks about wanting to give people more accessibility to public transport and to make public transport the preferred mode of travel for more people more often, and give people travel choices. For our current and future residents, with the current bus service, the only travel choice for most of them is to use the car or don't go at all. This morning, I am asking you to approve option 3 on page 31, that is to fully fund the improvement to the North Coast bus service. In the overall scheme of things, this is not a huge number, especially when one considers recent significant rate rises. I have not seen the ORC application to NZTA Wakatibu to fund 50% of the cost of the improved service, but I would like to see it. Nor do I know why they have turned down your application for the 50% funding, but I would like to know why. The village of Warrington does not have a public transport bus service at all. On the current route, the bus travels south from Waikouaiti, goes into Karetani, turns around and then heads back to the state highway and onwards towards Waitati via Evansdale. We would like to see the bus go into Warrington in a similar fashion to Karetani. And we've timed this and it would add about 8 minutes to the journey. I also have a safety concern about one aspect of the current service. It seems that at the time of the afternoon 3:30 service, the bus is sometimes overfull and some passengers are left standing. The bus heads out of town, up Pine Hill and onto the state highway, traveling at the regulation 90 kilometers an hour. If the driver had to brake suddenly for any reason and standing passengers take a tumble, that would not comply with your stated aspiration to provide a safe public transport system. I want to thank your transport manager, Gary Maloney, for working with us on this topic over the past couple of years. When Gary told me that the NZTA 50% funding was not coming through, I asked him to advise what improvements could be achieved if ORC only funded their original 50% share. Gary suggested that there could be either 2 extra weekday runs plus a Friday evening service or a weekend service. I asked for input from North Coast bus users about their preference for one or other of these 2 options by way of articles in the latest local monthly newspapers and in the social media platforms that exist in our communities. And I asked for feedback by Tuesday of this week. We had good feedback with more than 130 responses. 73% of those responding favoured a weekend service. There were also many comments about the whole bus service and many folk asking for both options. It would be easy to talk about this topic for quite some time, but I see that my 5 minutes is just about up. So I'll conclude now by asking once again for you to approve option 3, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have. And I see we made it with 22 seconds to spare.
Well done, Alistair. Thank you very much. In terms of why Wakatibu turned down the funding application, I'm sure that will be revealed later on in the meeting, but I'll just check with councillors whether there are any questions. Brian?
I apologize, I haven't got the data in front of me, but I'm assuming, Alistair, that from your perspective, community's perspective, that they'll patronise. Alistair,
Try again.
can you hear Alistair? I think you might have to pull your mic a bit closer
Yeah.
or switch it on.
Apologies, Alistair. Is from your perspective, the community perspective, is this a vital service in terms of, buses? Is it well patronised? I haven't got the data in front of me. Apologies.
Yes, it is. Speaking to some of the people who called, some of them didn't just email us, they phoned up as well. Some of the buses are very full, others are not quite so full. And one thing I would like to do once you approve all this funding is to sit with Gary and some of the bus users and get a feedback into whether we should be tweaking the actual times of the bus runs, because I've seen many buses around town with nobody on them, and we don't want that to happen up our area. And we will be emphasising to all the local people that this would be a use it or lose it system. But at the moment, the buses are well patronised. I think your B card system can show just what the patronage is, but I don't have the data on that.
Thank you.
Question from Kate.
Hi, Alistair. Just wondering, I'm just having a quick search of the rates implications for this as far as I can gather it. What you'd be saying is if you got a Warrington service, that whole area would then be rated, and you think that would be acceptable because they're not rated, I think, at the moment.
I don't know whether Warrington people are rated at the moment. I've never seen a Warrington ORC rates bill. What we have been asked for is there's been a number of things over the years. Some people have suggested running a bus from Karitani down Coast Road to Warrington. That doesn't really make sense because Coast Road's a very undulating road, and a number of people would be sick on that road. So the idea of running the bus in from the highway to Warrington, similarly to Karitani, to us makes a degree of sense, and it's something we would have to work through with Gary.
Okay, just checking, do you know what the implications are for the increased service under option 2 for the rates?
I think that's in your report that you've got this morning.
Yeah.
The whole rate thing, I don't know. That's really what your bean counters are there for.
Yeah, no, I understand the total. I can't remember if I could see the individual. No, that's okay. It's just whether the community would bear paying double that to do the Wakatibu contribution as well.
Yeah, I don't know, and it's disappointing that we haven't really had any sort of information about why these people have not come up with funding.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
A question from Gary.
Yeah, Alistair, what's your opinion of option 2? Is it a step almost in the right direction, but it just doesn't go far enough, or because that's the recommendation of staff?
From speaking to the people in the community, option 2 is a half pie start, because at the moment what we have is not very good at all. It's essentially hopeless. Option 2 would be a start, but then again, I'm going to be sitting here again a year from now, berating you once more for a not fully, a not complete service, if you like. So really, I'm asking for option 3, and obviously that's something you have to balance against all your other expenditure. But option 2, we got the indication from the people that a weekend service would be preferred to the other option that you've given us. And we have to talk this through depending on how you resolve things today. So brief answer to your question, option 2 is a bit half pie.
Okay, thank you.
That concludes the questions, Alistair. Thank you very much for being with us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
I might even spend a wee bit of time watching you when you're talking about this.
Thought you might.
Aye. Okay. Hey, thanks a lot for your time. Bye.
Good on you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Moving on to back to the agenda, item number 3, confirmation of the agenda. I'll move from the chair that the council meeting, the public part of the council meeting, i.e. starting at 11, we will conclude at 12:30, break for lunch, which is approximately an hour's time now, for between 12:30 and 1, and then 1 till 2, the public excluded item, the Clutha River depositing of material, if we deal with that item between 1 and 2, and the reasons being both Alexa and Gretchen are having to head away at some time during the afternoon, and just wanted to make sure that we had as good a turnout for that item as possible. So
I'll second that.
I'll move that. Thank you. Is there any clarification needed? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Conflict of interest, just that reminder that you need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between your role as an elected representative and any private or any external interest that you might have. Is there any heads up at this stage by anybody who has that situation? If not, moving on to item 5, confirmation of minutes. I'll move that the minutes of the 24th of November 2021 council meeting be approved as true and correct, signed by Michael Laws. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Moving on to item 6, which is actions. Is there anything to follow up there? I've got to undertake a review of the Manuhiri Care governance decision making process, which I haven't started. It's due on the 9th, as in today. It's something I'll do over the next, before we're back together.
Is that just laziness?
Beg your pardon?
It's just
Pleased I didn't hear that comment. I will report back in the new year, and the other items have been dealt with.
Would we have an idea of when you would report back and put a time frame on it?
I would imagine the council.
As we would ask our staff to.
Okay, the council meeting, the first council meeting in the new year.
Thank you.
I do.
Any queries, comments, on the action list? If not, Kate.
And I should have looked at this earlier. We've got the second one on there, which is the first one in the grey, is about the poll, and there's a note in there about it costing $75,000, not including additional comms that will be necessary. And I'm just wondering, because we're doing the annual plan review, if we are going to do extra comms, does it need to have to be pulled in somewhere?
So we budgeted for those extra comms in all the governance budgeting. It's just that we don't have an specific number for the comms.
Okay, so it is in the budget, so we can do this well.
Yes.
Thank you.
In fact, there's a meeting this afternoon with LGNZ as they're rolling out, to talk about national campaign material.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, we'll finish there. Moving on to item 7, matters for council's consideration. The first item, 7.1, is the review of flood protection management bylaw 2012. Welcome to Gavin, Michelle and Alison. So this report is provided to commence the review process of the Otago Regional Council's Flood Protection Management Bylaw 2012. There are 3 recommendations there. We note the report. We adopt the recommendation that the bylaw is the most appropriate way of ensuring the integrity and the satisfactory performance of the Council's flood protection works. And we approve the recommendations to commence the review of the Flood Protection Management Bylaw 2012. Welcome all. Gavin, we take the report as read, or is there something that you'd like to highlight or say?
No, Mr. Chairman, we'll take the report as read, and I think Ms. Mifflin will introduce Ms. Weaver for
Excellent.
council.
Thank you.
So moved.
Michelle, we're in your hands. I'm not sure whether your mic's on.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I'd like to introduce Miss Alison Weaver, who is our team leader for commercial and regulatory and engineering. Alison has been with us for nearly 12 months.
Oh, so this is your first visit to the table, Alison?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it was great to have you here with us, and it's always good, you know, from a governance perspective, we recognise faces and your roles within the organisation. So it's great to have you here today. Michelle, is there anything you want to add in any way to the paper in front of us? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I would just add that we consider this paper reasonably procedural. It's not an uncommon paper to bring to start the review process for our bylaw. The bylaw is due to expire on the 31st of August 2022, by which then, if we've not renewed it, it will continue under the Act to wind down over 2 years and cease to exist. And then we would have to start a whole new process. So we're wanting to start the review process to look at some text, some mapping information that we've identified over the last decade, collected information, and improve it.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions or queries? It's been moved by Michael Laws, seconded by Gary. A question from Hilary, and then Alison, and then Kevin.
Sorry, it wasn't.
Alexa.
It wasn't a question if we've moved it. I was just going to speak briefly to it then.
I'll just go to the two other questions, Alexa, and then Kevin. I'll come back to you, Hilary.
It's almost off topic, but it's just, I'm wondering about this bylaw, if there's any opportunity.
Microphone, Alexa.
I'm wondering about this bylaw, if there's any opportunity in there to start thinking about using stop banks for purposes like cycle trails and access to them. I'm not sure that it happens within there, but I just.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question.
That's all right. Ignorance is bliss.
Indeed, there's always an opportunity to look at cycle tracks on trails. That's not the function for the bylaw review. However, the bylaws function around if we enable cycle tracks will come into play, certainly ensuring the protection and the integrity. That will be the function of the bylaw.
That's right. And I see there's an opportunity for us to talk about what comes into that bylaw at another February.
Indeed, we have suggested a possible workshop with councillors to work through our initial findings of the types of changes we might be looking at.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you, Kevin.
Is this actually the best way to go ahead, or can we actually write this into our land and water plan, and would that be the long-term solution? Do we have to have a bylaw? I think I read in there that if the land and water plan is constructed right, it protects it anyway.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll start and then Ms Weaver will finish. There are always opportunities to improve our land and our regional plans to assist, but I think the bylaw, particularly where a council has assets and infrastructure, provides a specific set of rules that are not always necessarily covered in the regional plan. And because we have associated designations and other triggers, I think it's quite a specific ruling. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, there's probably not much more to add to that.
Cool.
Yeah, there's just a nice structure within the bylaw to deal with its specific set of assets.
Thank you. Kate, thank you. Kate.
This may be a detail issue, a bit like Councillor Forbes' matter, but I'm going to ask it anyway and tell me to come back at the next meeting if needed. In paragraph 19, you talk about anchored tree protection and plantings. And at the moment, we, I think, use the bylaw for specific flood protection works, but not for general flood bank integrity on the river management in a wider sense, like Pomahaka. Is that correct? We use the bylaw in a very narrow way rather than in general.
We've got the maps in the book, and they basically show where it is. So a lot of banks of rivers are protected or considered defences against water, for example, or drainage systems.
Yeah, I don't think we do the Pomahaka, do we? No. And so the question is, when we do have flood banks, as we have in the Pomahaka, would this be an opportunity to be including that sort of one and the river management of trees, because that is a huge issue, and people not either empowering people to do tree work there or not empowering and giving people a process, because at the moment it's almost not sure what to do. Or is that
okay? Okay, I'll lead. So I think I'm understanding your question correctly. The bylaw acts as a specific set of ruling around our strategic assets. Whilst it shows mostly our flood banks and our drains, it doesn't actually cover rivers. Unless there's a strategic asset in there, which are flood banks or drains. That's primarily. So the bylaw doesn't function to operate across rivers unless they're designated or there is an asset in there. I think what you're referring to is the work we're going to be doing next year around our river management plans and strategy. That's separate to the bylaw.
It's almost a crossover. There is almost a crossover though, no?
But the bylaw protects activities that would worsen the effect on the actual strategic assets. So it's to ensure that we're not doing planting or repairing planting that would actually undermine the functionality of drains or flood banks. Sorry, Gavin, did you want to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just draw your attention to paragraph 20, which just notes that the bylaw is focused on assets and features that are owned by or under the control of the ORC. If you wanted to put some control on plantings and other things established by people other than the ORC, or natural, riparian vegetation that serves a useful flood protection purpose, you would need a different way of dealing with that, and that's potentially land and water plan.
Okay, I'll come back with another question on that.
Okay.
Any further questions? If not, it's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. If not, I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Good luck with the process, and no doubt we'll hear along the steps along the way as the public are involved. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 7.2, Ministry Review of the Wakatibu Basin School Bus Services and Dunedin Changes. We've got with us Gavin and Gary, and the report updates Council on changes to commercial school bus services in Dunedin and on the proposal from the Ministry of Education to review the school bus service it provides in Queenstown. Just a couple of things just to note. That the recommendations, obviously noting the report and authorising the CE to approve minor changes to the Dunedin bus network in time for the start of the 22 school year, and to address school connectivity issues that have or may arise given the cessation of the commercial services at the end of 2021. It's pretty much focused on Dunedin, but just an early heads up with the Wakatibu situation. It's also covered off on the paper, and I just need to share with everyone, I think I'd shared it yesterday, the letter from Jim Bolt, who just made the point around Queenstown's passenger transport demands won't always be the way they are. And by the time the Ministry of Education have fully withdrawn the services by 2025, you'd like to think he'd be back to business as normal. So we just note that view of the Mayor's. But we're in your hands, Gavin, Gary. Gary, is there anything you want to add to the report in front of us? There was a couple of questions that obviously popped up from Alistair Morrison, Chair of Waikiki Coast Community Board. You may want to address those at the front end, or we're in your hands anyway, Gary.
No, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer questions.
I've got one to do with Wakatibu.
Okay, Michael.
Because I can see, I'm looking at paragraph 40 of the report, and I have to say, Alexa, I think you're probably right. Our experience is that we're going to have some issues. I take it that you're talking to the schools affected already, are you?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no. but because it's not our transition and it's, you know, the ministry's piece of work at the moment.
The option here that we're being asked to adopt is to get you to talk to them.
So I think, yeah, so the clarity around the options two, does it relate totally to Dunedin, and the other comment in the report where it talks about the heads up with what's bubbling away in Wakatibu, which has been driven by the Ministry of Education, is just a heads up for us. Is that correct, Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So you're quite right. There's two issues, Dunedin and Queenstown. For Dunedin, we've asked for the CE to have a delegation to make some changes there for those schools. For Queenstown, what we're saying is that review is signalled to start now, and we're working at an officer level on a draft memorandum of understanding that we will bring back to council to approve or not. And that's the point, if it does, that we do the work with the ministry, and that will involve communications with the schools affected, the communities affected, if that's what you agree to.
So the changes to the Wakatibu bus timetable are going to happen at the start of the next school year?
There won't be any changes to our Queenstown bus timetable. The ministry is hopeful that if we do collaborate, that the earliest that there may be some change could be term 3 next year.
Okay, cool.
Kate, then Hilary.
Thank you. I'd like to personally acknowledge ORS and their work in making schools travel a safe experience for kids. It's really sad to see a business that's been around and served quite a wide range of Otago leaving. But I'd also like to ask the question, what concerns me, and I'm really happy for the Chief Executive to have the authority to sign off minor changes, but we're not getting a report back, or should we be asking for a report back on the efficiency and capacity of the changes? Because we really don't know what we don't know until this happens, and we may need to look at some more minor changes or major changes after that. And what would that process be?
Through Mr. Chair, my apologies, because I talk about that in the body of the report.
Yeah.
I haven't incorporated that into the resolution, and that was, we would report back on the exercising of that delegation by the CE. But as I say, I hadn't put that in the recommendation.
Well, I'm just wondering whether you think we should. I mean, I'm not going to offend you if we do that. It sort of closes that loop. If that's okay, so I'll send something through to, or yeah.
Okay. Just before we go to Hilary, my apologies for confusing this paper with the next one
Yeah.
with regards to Waikawhati Coast. Sorry. Hilary.
Would your anticipation be that this amount of money would go into the annual plan process?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So the only signals that we've had at the moment is from one school, and I've given an idea of what the cost of that small change is. I mean, there has to be a way to fund it ultimately, and at the moment that's slightly unbudgeted.
Well, not ultimately, you know, in 3 weeks. I mean, at the beginning of next year, if we're doing it. I'm just saying that first you figure out what you want to do, and at the same time you sort out how to fund it. So have you guys, for example, put in something for the or factored in the possibility of putting something in for the annual plan process? Because quite clearly, if it's going to be $20,000 a year or thereabouts, it wants some money to go into the annual plan process on an ongoing basis.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, you know, it's a $20+ million budget that's demand driven, and so it just means that inflation has to be up or down by a couple of points from what we've budgeted on, and there's either money there or we need more money. So $20,000 is fairly, I mean, it's a large amount of money, but not in terms of that whole budget. I mean, you could put $20,000 and we could still be over and under budget.
Is that a no?
It's a no, yes, it's a no.
I would like to see it factored in if we're choosing to do that. I just think every bit of money that we're proposing to spend, because part of what we thought of earlier and what we've been going round and about with the Finance Committee and things is, for every time somebody suggests we spend money, that we know where it's coming from and what's happening with it and whatever. And I do take Mr Maloney's point that it's as regards the transport budget, it seems reasonably small, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take into account
About
what we're doing with spending money.
formulate something that could be a motion along those lines, that we note that amount as the estimate cost, because it sounds like it's very difficult to very accurately come up with a number.
I'm just, I guess I don't, it's not a motion thing. I guess I'm just asking that it gets put into the budgeting for the annual plan.
Okay.
And if I can have that assurance from our people, then that's fine.
Okay, so you've taken that on board. Nick's going to be aware of it, correct? Okay, Alexa.
Thank you. I just think this paper's fine. It's what we have to do. There's not any real choices in it, and I'd like to put the motion as written.
Okay, yeah, you happy to move that? Seconded by Gretchen. There's a couple other questions to go to Gary, then Brian.
Yeah, my question was just around if we are aware of looming changes in the Wakatibu, and if we were concerned about that, or if council was of a mind that it had a concern around that, do we get any opportunity to input or influence MOE on that?
We can log
through you, Mr Chairman. Ultimately, the decision about whether the ministry removes services is its, and it just has to satisfy itself that there's suitable public transport there. So you really, when the MOU comes to you really have two choices, and you probably have them now, and that's either to collaborate and work through it, or not, and hope that there's enough public opposition that the ministry decides it won't do it again.
Surely we don't want to suggest putting anything in place, because that'll allow them to decide that they won't do it because there's a public thing in place.
No, just Gary's got the floor, so to speak. So does it, you've had the answer, Gary?
Yeah, it sounds like no, we don't.
Yeah. So just on that, Gary, so the MOU that is being developed in collaboration with MOE, so that's our point of influencing MOE, is that correct? No, it's not.
Well, it's not influencing the decision. It's just setting out a process by which you will engage together on a transition. At that point, it's transition's going to happen. The MOU, we were intending to bring it back to this meeting for your endorsement, but the delay has been MOE saying they wanted it to be wider than Wakatibu, a region-wide MOU.
Thank you.
An MOU covering all school services in Otago.
They want us involved in that, Gavin. Sorry.
Yeah, hang on, Michael.
Sorry.
Sorry, yes, we'll be involved. So the way the MOU was originally constructed, it was around the Wakatibu issue that's in this paper. What they have said, though, is they've changed their mind and would like the MOU to provide for a process of discussion around, I suppose, Dunedin and Wakatibu, if you like. Embracing both areas, not just one, not just the immediate one.
So,
which kind of makes sense, I think.
So we're in discussions, and the ability to influence is through those discussions.
Yes, but your influence will be around transition, timing and how that all kind of works. I don't think it's going to be an MOU to decide whether it should happen.
Yes, fair enough. Okay, thank you. I've got before we go to Brian, I've got Michael Deeker, please.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. My question was really, if you'll accept it, is going back to Dunedin and the retreat of Otago Road Services. Can I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
Good, thank you. Yeah, what struck me in reading Gary's report is the number of students who come in each day from the Mosgiel area to go to a variety of Dunedin schools, most of them high schools. And they will, of course, all want to travel at the same times in the morning and then in the afternoon. And I think there was something like between 170 and 250. And I know that the Mosgiel service is sometimes very well patronised. to the point where 2 buses are needed. Now, my question is to Gary, can we, with existing services, transport that number of kids, especially between 8 and 8:30 every morning, going to the Highgate schools, the South Dunedin schools, the Targa boys, Targa girls, etc. How are we going to deal with that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So not all those children are coming out of Mosgiel. They're coming out of Brighton, for example, as well. They all congregate in Green Island and they transfer there and go through to their schools. For a lot of them, the reason they do that is they don't want to transfer onto our services. So yes, we will probably pick up some extra student passengers. If you were to pick up 100 kids each morning out of Mosgiel, yes, we don't have the capacity for that and we won't have it in place for the start of the school year, but I suspect that mums and dads will be making other arrangements, and it doesn't preclude the schools themselves doing their own thing.
By that, Gary, do you mean that schools, you expect, will arrange their private bus charters to bring those kids in each day and take them home again?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I have heard anecdotally that one school in particular is looking at organising its own services. So it is an option there. I mean, we're not necessarily the provider of last resort.
Okay, thank you.
Brian.
Yeah.
Microphone.
Is that okay? I'm after some clarification. Look, on the face of it, this seems to be a no-brainer in terms of paragraph 41, where it says, if we take the school bus patronage, it'll increase the public bus patronage at minimal extra cost to the ratepayers. It says the customers will be able to use accessible buses and will have a more integrated network. But I'm just thinking back to any learnings from the, is it Tahuna experience that we had? Have I got that school right? Seems like yesterday. Was it Tahuna? Yeah. Okay. And on the face of it, there was a certain amount of tension at the governance table about the situation, because what actually happened was that the community felt that the school pupils on the public bus system were put in an unsafe situation in terms of getting to their school. So in the end, we actually tweaked the route, and there was some, quite a bit of pressure not to, because we try to have simple routes, direct routes. We tweaked the route to go via that school. I assume it was successful. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. So my question is quite simply that while it mightn't be our business to decide whether the school buses are put onto the public bus system, will the routes that the school buses take, that they've taken, will they be the same as the public bus system? So that's the first question, followed by a second question. So will they be the same?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, but what we're looking at doing, and so we've had this same thing with Kaikorai Valley College, which I talk about in the report, is the issue in the morning for the south is what happens when those kids get to Green Island. It turns out that our Brighton service terminates for a while around that time. So we're looking at actually extending that to Kaikorai Valley College. And so while that'll be a public service, anybody could get on. And effectively, it's going from Green Island to Kaikorai Valley. And unless you want to get off at those 2 points, it's not going anywhere else.
What is the answer? Is the answer yes or no? Is it the same or not?
It will depend on what schools come for and ask for.
Okay, so it depends. The answer is it depends, because what we're actually doing with this resolution is saying to our CE, is to do these minor changes. Whereas actually, from previous experience, what actually happens is that there's a bit of a storm, because we haven't actually communicated with the schools. We've communicated with one school, and then the schools fall out with the ministry and they go, we don't want to take the ORC service. All these things are issues with the ORCs. We're then dragged into the storm, you know, whereas actually we all said this was straightforward. So we're dragged into the storm. And then what actually happens is that there's this pressure to actually change our route or change some of our service, which might be reasonable or it might be contrary to the principles of our service. So personally, I'm disappointed that we haven't had some feedback from the schools via the ORC about basically what their feeling actually is, because it just seems to me as one councillor, I'm going to vote on something that looks pretty straightforward, and I'd almost bet that that's the last thing that it'll be.
It's through you, Mr. Chairman. I can't give you an undertaking that won't happen, councillor.
Yeah.
You know, as soon as you get into the new school year and mum and dad wake up to the fact that little Johnny can't catch that bus anymore. Yeah.
So I wish SE a very Merry Christmas in terms of this resolution.
I think it's important to remember that, you know, within the existing service that we have, some relatively modest tweaking can help satisfy a number of schools within the Dunedin catchment. Gretchen, sorry, yes, Gretchen, sorry.
Thanks.
Yep.
I just wanted to say that I think it's sensible, same as Alexa. A few tweaks is great. The positive side of this, hearing from the other situation we had, which was around North Dunedin, and we had a representation of schools from there as well, and talking to some communities around Sawyers Bay and other areas. They initially felt really nervous about not having direct, a changing service, I suppose, but actually the community's really positive and kids independently catching buses to those northern schools and really enjoying being part of the public bus service. And the other side of that is that it's from an early age, encouraging people to use our buses and learn that it's okay to be doing that, and for other families to be learning through their kids as well. So actually, I think it's really positive. Thanks.
Carmen, Kevin, Gary.
Thank you. I would like to concur with Councillor Scott. It seems straightforward, but I can see principals sitting there next year jumping up and down at us, because the thing that worries me is when you read the risks, the risk consideration of 25 and going on to 24 and 25 and 26, Dunedin schools wrongly assuming council replace the ORS service for the start of the 2022 year, and Dunedin schools having different expectations to what the council will deliver. I just think it's sad too. I think in a way, there's a Dunedin service been around for a long time. Targo Road Services, it was around when I was at Kevner. It was 30 something years ago, and it's about to go. So I'm very cautious. I'm like you, Councillor Scott. I just think there's some more to this that should be straightforward, but it won't be. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, all I'll say to that was that obviously a commercial decision by them to
I know.
pull out. So
Yep.
something totally out of I suppose, our influence, to be fair. Kevin?
Look, I'd just like to endorse Councillor Robertson's sentiments about that. It is probably a great way to get younger people into our service. But the thing that we really need to do is ensure that experience is a good experience for them. So that is critical, because they are, in fact, if we're all pushing to get mode change and get things done, well, we have to make this, and I'm not saying you won't, Mr. Ryan, have a very good service going, but I mean, that's going to be the critical part of it. And if we can encourage them onto the buses. My question that I do have a weak issue, is the ministry providing any funding to us to assist in the transition? And if not, have we asked for just a wee tad?
With respect to Queenstown?
No, for Dunedin.
Oh, so the change in Dunedin
or both,
is,
sorry.
Yeah, both. Sorry. The change in Dunedin is a commercial decision unrelated to Ministry of Education.
Oh, okay, right.
With respect to Queenstown, no. I mean, I haven't asked for it, but my experience has been you can ask, you get told no. So I'm happy to ask if that's what you want.
Thank you. Gary?
Look, we have a bus service, and of course we are going to look to increase patronage. I actually think what the ministry is doing, and the commercial element of this, is an absolute appalling disgrace. I think it is a sad indictment on our government that they would look to be diminishing services for our children that gets our children safely to school on a service that is generally full. What I see of school buses, it is managed so that the buses have the numbers that they need. And as we see suggestions of diminishment, say in Wakatibu, then that may be ongoing into other areas. When you put a child on a school bus, there is no fear of them sitting beside a mongrel mob member. But when you put a child on a public service, there is. And we see children from 5 or 6 years old or whatever getting on school buses, knowing that a bus driver will get them safely outside their school. And that is diminishing by a very rapid number by the looks of it. So I think it is a very sad situation to see.
Kate, and then we'll wrap it up. Oh, so, okay, Michael Decker.
Is your mute, Michael? Maybe is that his hand up from before?
I'm sorry, I didn't notice that. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I didn't want to sound like an advocate for the Ministry of Education with these comments, but they do have a clearly stated policy on this issue, as in Gary's report, clause 15. I'm pretty familiar with those words because I used to be a Ministry of Education manager, and those words have not changed. They haven't changed since the 1940s. And the ministry's job is to fairly and consistently apply that policy right across New Zealand. So if there is a suitable public transport system available, then, as there clearly is in the Wakatibu Basin, then they will pull out of providing services. And that's the case across the country. It's not the ministry's job to take in loco parentis responsibility for every kid getting to school. That is the parent's responsibility. If the parent is satisfied that a school bus, that a public transport bus is not safe, then you don't put your child on that bus. But the ministry's job is to impose that policy fairly across New Zealand. That's all.
Thank you. Kate.
I'm happy with this motion because we actually haven't got any other choices. And as far as the Dunedin service goes, as I articulated, it's very sad that ORS have pulled out and all of their bus drivers, and some won't stay with the next companies. That's fine. But what we've got is a capacity issue that, with all respect, school principals have had a hell of a lot to deal with in the last month or so. And I don't know that planning for next year's bus service is going to be highest on their priority or ability to do it right at the moment. So this is going to be a problem that, especially for intermediate schools and things like that, which will, as you get the new role and see how it works, may become a really big issue for our chief executive very quickly, and how many buses are at capacity or overflowing and people just not getting to school. So in that context, I do want to move, and I'm talking to it now, the subsequent motion which asks for a report back to understand it, or at least some way of us checking what it looks like. I didn't vote for the public transport or regional transport plan because I am slightly concerned that we don't take children into account in our public services in the way that I think children deserve to be considered residents and needing there. We provide a service that is more focused on employment and shopping and around those sort of centres rather than around schools. And I think that's a really sad indictment on what we could be doing to get mode shift. I really respect the fact that Councillor Decker, one of our oldest councillors, uses, long-standing as well, but uses the bus regularly not because he can't drive, but because that was a habit that he learned in his youth. Most of us didn't have that habit. This is a huge opportunity for us to get that habit back in kids and what should be future focused. So for me, there is a much, much bigger picture here that we should be saying, how can we enable and encourage all children going to school to get on a bus and provide a service that gets them out of cars? And what this may do to the traffic flows in the south and the huge numbers of cars already coming in from the south could exacerbate another issue. So I want to be really mindful of that. That's why I'm moving the third subsequent motion, which talks about us getting a report back on the capacity issues. But I also want to ensure that we're providing a service that encourages kids onto and to use the public service as much as possible. Hence my concerns.
Thank you. I haven't got a seconder, and I'm not going to yet, because I'm going to ask Alexa and Gretchen as mover and seconder if you are happy, you're both happy that the third motion reading request staff report back to the first implementation committee of 2022 on the efficacy, sorry, of the minor changes and any capacity issues that occur from the reduction in bus services provided in Dunedin. Alexa.
I need to know from Gary that that's
okay. Okay, right. No, that's fine. Maybe let's just. Do you want to answer that now, Gary? So then we can put the whole.
I'm not sure that you're necessarily.
So we'll certainly report back on what we've done in the end, if you like, and it won't be until, of course, the school year starts before, if there is an issue, it becomes apparent. But at the moment, from the context we've had, it seems we've got a limited kind of thing to do there.
Can we change it to update? Provide an update rather than actually have to reporting. Yeah.
Oh, what do you mean only to implementation?
By an update, so you're both happy?
Then I'm okay with that. And that's
already
at least-
agreeing to enable them to make minor changes. So this would just be
Good, Scott. Now, I think Kevin was going to.
No, I'm
you were
happy.
done?
Yep.
No other speakers?
Yep.
Everyone understands
I'm
what
not actually happy, but
Aren't you?
I think we're concluded.
Okay. We'll put the three recommendations all as one. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. You want that recorded? Yes, please. So Gary and Carmen record their votes against. Thank you very much. You're not going anywhere at the moment, Gary, obviously. So moving on to 7.3. This is the 21-24 National Land Transport Program outcome. The report advised Council on the success of that National Land Transport Program bid and seeks a direction in regard to a long-term plan activity. The recommendations are there 1 to 5. Recommendation 3, we need to think about option 1, 2 and 3. We take the report as read, Gavin and Gary. I think so. Questions? Kevin.
Could you explain why they haven't funded the rest of the Palmerston to Dunedin route? Or the rationale behind that, Gary, would be good.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that I can particularly well. As you probably are aware, because of COVID, the agency's revenue sources are down. And so basically for this NLTP period, National Land Transport Program period, it's cash strapped. Stacking a Palmerston bus up against, for example, a major urban or even our Shaping Future Dunedin Mosgiel changes, it didn't stack up effectively. There was also, unlike our proposed Mosgiel changes, there wasn't a case for investment that spelled out why it would be a good investment on the agency's part to put its 100,000 into that service.
So they're not really convinced in wanting to make mode change and wanting, unless it's a short distance.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I mean, that was the missing thing, is they knew that this issue has been around for, well, as long as I've been here in terms of improving that service, but you're talking about one bus 3 times a day versus, a Mosgiel one which runs every half hour. And to be blunt, if I was investing for mode change, I'd invest in Mosgiel. I wouldn't invest in Palmerston. That's not to say that there's not a case for investing in
No, I understand
Palmerston,
what
but it's not necessary for that mode change. It's around a community service and for coverage reasons, so that mum and dad, or your seniors, don't have to come in at 7 o'clock in the morning to go to the doctor and go home at 3.
Thank you. Alexa, then Brian.
So Gary, we're stacking these up against each other, but actually if that community tells us that they're happy to have that targeted rate and get this bus service improved, wouldn't we be doing that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, so it's one targeted rate for Dunedin, so it's not split by, it's just that little bits for the North Coast. It's based on the properties that are in that targeted rate boundary.
And I wonder what Dunedin thinks about it in terms of its mode shift requirements. Anybody? I mean, is it something we consult on in our plan?
Us. I just had a quick look at the rates. Someone in Waikawari pays $47 for a B-class service, and I'm just quickly looking up a Dunedin one. I'll come back to you after the next question. Kevin.
Yeah, is there, it's probably more to finance to Mr. Donnelly, is there, if a community, specifically the coastal community, decided that they wanted to pay the difference, is it possible to strike a particular rate in that zone, and how would we have to go about that?
So currently, as Gary alluded to, is the rate is set across the whole of the targeted rating area. So we don't have different targeted rates across the zone. The only differential we have is for commercial property pays in Dunedin pays 3.75 times what residential property ratepayers pay. So it is possible to do that, but we would have to look at how that would work, and you would, we would have to consult on that. The question came up earlier about Warrington. For example, Warrington is not in the not in the targeted rating area at all. But as Gary said, once the decision is made where all the costs sit, they go into one pot, and then everybody in that rating zone is paying the same. So it's not like you're going, well, you get more frequent services in Mosgiel, so you pay more. There is the other thing of potentially this whole rating issue needs to be looked at from that perspective, because at the moment, of course, where you've got the flat fare issue, there's different benefits to the further out you live, the more benefit you actually get, because you can pay less on the actual bus and the bus fare, but in essence, you're paying exactly the same targeted rate. So there's a whole lot of pros and cons. It's very complicated, cost benefit, what you're trying to achieve. It all has to be factored in. And yes, you can do all sorts of different things. At the moment, we've got a flat rate effectively, apart from the differential for commercial versus residential across everybody. But that's not to say that that's how it needs to stay going forward. But we'd need to do a lot of work and analysis and consultation on that before we look to make a change, because it will be impacting a huge amount of people.
Yep. Thank you,
Brian, then Hillary.
Yeah, apologies. I missed what Alistair from the Community Board actually said about option 2.
He said it was half pie.
Yeah, it was half pie. Yeah, I'm not. Gary, through the chair, I mean, do you think it's still an option, a feasible option, option 2? Is it a transition option, by the way, where, and we've allowed for this in our annual and long-term plan, the 100 grand-ish, but so the answer is yes. And so you're saying it could be like one return there and back, one trip on a Saturday or a Sunday, or a couple of trips in the week.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, so it does give a better service than they have now.
Yeah.
But it's it provides 2 extra return trips per weekday.
Yeah.
So that's, if you like, 10 for the week, plus actually there's a Friday night service in there.
Oh, really? Each day?
Yes. Or something like the current 3 trips a day on Saturday and Sunday.
No, or Sunday.
Either weekends or better weekday services.
I think it says either, it says or Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah, a Saturday service or a Sunday service. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. But you think it's both, Gary?
Paragraph 35.
Better be careful what we promise. Yeah, so it might be half pie, half baked or whatever, but nevertheless, it is an improvement, as you say, and it is funded for, and we've already got a pretty extraordinary rate increase. It's not perfect, but I think it's a step in the right direction, I think. Saturday or Sunday, Gary?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So subsequent to the report, after having some contact with Mr. Morrison, I did a little bit more work, and I think the Saturday or the Sunday is based on the feedback from the community board at the time draft LTPs were being prepared. When I mentioned weekends is using the current timetable, if you like, that runs through the week. So it's significantly different to what the community board was pitching for weekends. If you do what the community board was pitching for weekends, yes, you can either have Saturday or Sunday. If you make some more compromises, you can probably have services on both days.
Okay, cool.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Kevin.
It just so we are at a $2 fare on that route. And I wonder, have you had any discussions with Mr. Morrison and his team, who are clearly in touch with what's happening up there? Where is that tipping point? Because that certainly we've certainly seen a patronage increase. Could we, to make up the difference, do you think his team would accept the $4 fare or whatever? I mean, have we tested those options out?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I'm using the right word, but you have an equity issue across the district, and that why is one part paying $4 when, for example, from Waitari to the city, it's about the same distance as from Mosgiel to the city. But then you've got, your Peninsula service, which is about halfway distance. So you really have to, I think, consider that in terms of the whole Dunedin fare, not just certainly with the $2 thing. Somebody from Palmerston that used to pay tens of dollars more is now only paying $4, and so we've certainly seen the patronage go up by 50% from what it was pre the $2 day. It is a well-used service. Mr. Morrison mentioned used better at some times of the day. So, for example, the first trip that comes in the morning is heavily used. Similarly, the trip that goes out at the end of the day and the middle one that goes out from the city is heavily used.
Right, so that could be tested further down the track. Equity. It used to be 13 cents from Harrington Street and 10 cents from Port Chalmers. That's going back a wee while, but there was always those different pricing options. But we've got a flat $2 rate, and I understand what you're saying. But I mean, if the community up there is willing, it might be worth a gap. No, thank you.
Gary, then Michael Deaker, then Brian.
Is a trial an option for 3 months? And see whether the community actually supports it or not.
Excuse me.
Yes, you can do that, but there are a lot of behind the scenes stuff that you have to do that's going to, whether it's for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, you still got those costs. So we will have to change this thing called our GTFS feed and all those other things. 3 months won't give you a good sample. Generally speaking, it can take 2 to 3 years for a service to prove itself or not. I mean, to be blunt, I think if you put extra service in there, whether it's option 2 or something else, it will get used. Oh, and I think even if the fare was higher, it would still get used.
Yes, of course it would.
Michael Deaker.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Kevin raised the point I was going to. I think that the wee tiny elephant in the room is this fare thing. It seems ludicrous to me that you can travel something like 67 kilometres on a bus for $2. That just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And it's high time that we reviewed our fares and put them up to something like equity, whether it be Palmerston or Harrington Point or Mosgiel. And if we did put a realistic fare on the Palmerston or route number 1, I don't think anybody would complain too much, and it would possibly solve our revenue issue to some extent. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I've got Brian. Then Hillary.
I'd like to move the motions, and I assume what number 3 is encapsulating option 2. Yeah, doesn't actually specifically say it.
It doesn't say which option 2.
You would need to refer to an option, I think, in that motion. Motion
Okay,
3.
well, I'm happy to move the motions, and that the preferred option option for Wakatibu be option 2.
Option 2 had options. Weekend or
No, well, I'll leave that for staff to work through with the community.
Okay. Seconded for the motion.
I'll
Seconded
second
by Alexa. So I know, Hillary, you've been waiting to speak, and you may have a question, and that's fine. Otherwise, speak to the motion. But you've got a question?
I've got several questions.
Oh, right, okay.
One of them is, how much per trip does it cost to provide the service at the moment?
Does that relate to, say, from Palmerston to Dunedin, or
yes,
or you're talking a total figure?
No, that line from Palmerston to Dunedin, and presumably it's into that the total cost and the amount that Wakatibu pays minus it.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So you're talking about the cost to operate the service, Councillor?
No, I'm talking about the cost per person using the service.
The $2 fare
is the fee.
is the fee. Yep.
What's the cost?
And what's the so you're not talking about the total cost to run the service, as Gary has said?
I'm talking about the cost.
Passenger.
They're paying $2. What does it actually cost?
Yep. So the
so my apologies, I can't give you that because it's part of a single contract price. That's not just that route.
Because what's appropriate? I mean, if somebody wants twice as much service, and what we could be agreeing to is something that currently costs the targeted ratepayer $10 per trip, and we're charging $2, and they say, could we have twice as much? And so now there's going to be twice as many trips, and it's going to be
$20.
You know, it's actually a useful piece of information to know.
I understand what
but
you're
you
asking
don't-
for,
you
Councillor,
don't-
but I
yeah,
haven't got it. But
yeah.
what I can say to you is it's part of a wider unit, and those other parts, and I can't quote you the routes that are in that unit 1, but they will be costing you a lot more. It's one bus and one driver, and you know, 130 Ks per return trip. So it is a small cost to provide that service compared to some of the other routes that are in that unit.
The second question, which, I mean, I can understand that you don't have the answer to that. The second question is, what precisely is option 1? Or, sorry, the one that people are proposing to have. Is that option 3? Option 2.
Option 2, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So option 2 is that we would invest what we have budgeted in a long-term plan. So that's our half share, if you like. And we would, in terms of the improvement, that would be worked out with the community board up to that value, if you like. So if they came back and said, We'd rather have the weekday service enhancements, then that's what we'd do. If they came back and said we'd rather have the weekend services, then that's what we'd look to do.
And has anybody not got a targeted rate who might be included in their proposal?
It potentially may pick up on the Warrington area. I mean, I haven't explored that much further with the community board out there, other than they've stated that's their desire to do that.
So we would need to know that, wouldn't we? Could we actually have in this resolution what it is that we would be approving? Because if we are approving our staff to go away and sort something out that could be with people who aren't currently paying a targeted rate and might then be paying a targeted rate, or, I mean, I think we need to have exactly what it is. Is it at least going to be restricted to people who are already paying a rate within that figure? Because that figure is, I can see that it's the figure in our plan, which is good from my point of view, but if it might be being charged on people who aren't the people who have got the targeted rate, then that sort of is a whole can of worms, sort of, isn't it? Could we have in there what it is that we've...
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we certainly do that. And that makes it tidier, is just to restrict it to the targeted rate area, or the area that's rated for the targeted rate.
Well, historically, obviously, there's been a formula used, and the bus, because the bus doesn't go down Coast Road, obviously Warrington aren't included in the targeted rate. However, it doesn't stop them driving a few Ks to Evansdale and getting on the State Highway 1.
No, I'm quite supportive of their proposition. It's just that it's got fish hooks in it that I'm not sure how they interact with.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether we can resolve those fish hooks, because you could argue that the same.
No, but if we limit it in this case to targeted ratepayers, knowing that we can accept a proposition from people to change the targeted rate base and change what happens if to have the Warrington thing go in there. So
funding formula consideration is obviously annual plan. So that's where you would deal with that. We wouldn't be able to just deal with that here today.
No, but if we allow our staff to make a deal with a group of people who aren't currently paying the targeted rate and trying to use the targeted rate transport pool to pay that, I think we're doing a bad thing, aren't we?
I'm not sure whether I can answer that. But look, so...
it's sort of an inconsistent, bad probably isn't a good word, but we cannot use, can we, the targeted rate to provide services outside the targeted rate area, or?
But is it, well, if I use an example, and will I get this right, Kate will tell me if not. So if you take Outram, for example, there's nothing to stop someone from Outram to drive to Mosgiel and get on a Mosgiel bus and come to Dunedin.
I know, but I think, weren't they suggesting that we redirect the bus to Warrington?
I don't think option 2 suggests that. Is that correct, Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So it was mentioned by the community board, but I think if you restrict yourself to our long-term plan budget, it doesn't allow, it's either that extra weekday service on the current route or it's weekends. It doesn't allow that, and I suspect very much that if you approve option 2, that you will get a submission on your annual plan saying now we want the rest, and that might include Outram.
So we wouldn't have 4 in recommendations. What would we have? Could we have up there what people are actually proposing to put in this resolutions, so people with little brains like me can understand what it exactly?
Okay, so the inference from Brian, who's the mover of the motion, I sense that the detail was going to be worked out in consultation with the community board chair.
Yes, but that's got a problem if their feedback is to do something that's outside the targeted rate area.
Are you able to clarify, Brian?
I mean, from my perspective, the only thing that really needs to be worked through in consultation with the community is whether it's weekday
Or weekends.
or weekends.
Or
Yeah,
Saturday-
you know,
Saturday or
not a
Sunday.
route change, not a new
Yep.
targeted base.
Yep.
You know, that's all, as you say, Mr. Chair, that's all an annual plan process. Look, you know, there are certain balls that are in the air with this, you know, the Warrington, the $2 fare, you know, whether in the future they actually want the option 3 sort of scenario. But in the meantime, what we're doing is honouring something that we basically agreed to in our previous annual plan was to budget 100K to ideally help them out in the weekends. Okay, it could be a weekday thing as well, possibly. But so I think the motion should quite simply just maybe is at number 4 where it says option 2 and that liaison with the Waikato Coast Community Board is only in relation to whether it's weekends versus weekday runs. Yeah.
But just clarity on that matter, incorporated in recommendation 4. That's what
Yeah.
you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So we're basically wanting to clarify in number 4 that the form of the service relates to additional weekday service or a weekend
And or,
and/or.
in case you can work something through, you never know.
as I say, I'm
Don't wanna
sympathetic to the
exclude it.
Warrington thing. I just think it's
It's not in here and
Yeah.
you can't
And
do
the
a
weekend
change.
service, even though that we're actually really only talking about Saturday or Sunday,
Yeah.
or it could be one bus on Saturday, one bus on Sunday. I don't know. But if we just have a weekday service and or weekend service, is that broad enough?
No, that's not what option 2 is. Option 2 is actually giving them 2 extra services per weekday. A Saturday service or a Sunday service. That's what's there at the moment. So they're definitely getting the 2 extra services on the weekday. Is that correct, Mr. Maloney?
No.
No,
I think
it's changed. He
It's
told us.
that
it's
versus weekends. That's my understanding.
It's moved on from.
Mr. Chairman, I just want, it's a timetable issue. So if you put the word timetable in there, which is different to route, that might give the flexibility, but restrict it so it's not dealing with a route through an unrated area, might be the way to deal with it.
Cool.
Okay.
But is it intended to be 2 additional weekday services and rather, or is it and or is it plus either Saturday or Sunday?
But that's.
We've got 100K and staff will liaise with the community board to
And
work
figure out the
out
best
what
way.
timetable tweaks are optimised.
And yes, and I would just like to ask, and I don't want to put this in a resolution, but when we've got these sorts of issues coming before us, I would like to know how much per journey things are costing to provide.
Gretchen.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really happy with the proposed resolutions. We have carefully actually considered those costs in the past, and we chose to build a quality, connected, simple network, and to do that using a $2 bus fare across all of our routes. And we know that this one doesn't fully pay for itself like many others. And there's rough justice across the network, I suppose. Some are longer, some are shorter. Yeah. But we wanted simplicity, and we weighed up at the time, looking very carefully at the numbers and how much this one actually costs. We chose to go with the $2 because we weighed up whether or not getting bums on seats and trying to maintain a viable service in that area and some sort of a connected network through that route was more important than raising the price, perhaps putting people off and actually making no difference to the revenue potentially. And when you looked at even how much it cost across our whole network and that it was an important part of the network, that's where we got to. So the other part of that simplicity means that we've taken quite a lot of loops out of the network, and Warrington was never part of the network, but again is a loop. You could think of many other loops that would potentially go to small settlements, and they're not there either, unfortunately. This one would take quite a bit of time to go out to Warrington, and we've looked really carefully at that before and looked at whether it would actually put off the bulk of the passengers with that loop or not, and it would. And also, yeah, whether weighing up that small drive and potentially ride sharing and all that. So I think we've come to a sensible solution, and yeah, let's just move on.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Sorry, Gary.
Yep, I'm sorry, I'm going to vote against. I think here we have a community represented by their community board saying that they want something different, which is option 3. I think we should, the only way we will know whether they can prove themselves is whether it'll work or not is to give it to them and see whether it would. And if it isn't in a year's time, we will have shown, well, this wasn't a good move. But yet again, we've spent an awful long time talking ourselves out of it rather than listening to the community and talking ourselves into it. So, yeah, I'll be voting against for that reason.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Carmen.
I would have to concur there with Councillor Callaghan. I also too will be voting against it, and I think they would like option 3, and I think we should consider it. Thanks.
Foreshadowing new option 3.
Well, we could.
Loses.
The motion's on the table, and if it loses, we would consider it.
Well, maybe foreshadow it, but you haven't got anything in your annual plan for it. You're going to have to find the money.
No, but we could have next
100K.
year. We could consult it.
We could consult on it.
Yeah.
Excuse me, can I speak?
Okay, further speakers, Michael.
I just was saying, I listened to this very carefully. I haven't said anything, but I think there is a way of satisfying everybody, and that is that you simply consult on this issue at the annual plan. So then you are consulting directly on this issue. It's an amendment. It's not hard to do. I think there's a failure of intellect here, actually. We want to provide the service. They've asked for it. Are they prepared to pay a bit more? We haven't entered that conversation. So the obvious time to do it is during annual plan discussions. No, we haven't consulted with the Palmerston community over whether or not they would be prepared to pay for example, as an option, an increased service.
So we just had, and we've got, was it 50K or 54K or something in this year? This year, 100K next year. So we've already made a commitment to enhance the services on Route 1.
Yeah,
so that's already done and dusted.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that they're looking for they are looking for an improved service above and beyond that. The question is, why aren't we talking to them about, okay, what do you want? Are you prepared to pay for it? Or can we actually say this is a community good and therefore we can?
Yeah. So with regards to the 50 odd K, which we didn't secure, we were unable to secure the Wakatibu additional funding.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So it's limited to the 50K for the balance of the 21-22 year. The following year, there's 100K in our budgets.
Yes.
For the enhanced services on Route 1.
So what's the problem? Why can't we talk to them and ask them? Sorry, you go.
We just had that discussion with Nick, because all of Dunedin ratepayers would have to be consulted about this one targeted rate, because they
Nick's sorry.
We're not going to have an interacting. Look, either speak to the motion and support or against. So
fair enough. I don't support it, and I think that we've got other options that are available on the table. And I also have to say that I have been a mayor, and you can rate small communities, and we often do, and TAs often do, and identify targeted rates to those. You don't need to put a targeted rate all over Dunedin. That's simply not correct.
I'd like to move the motion be put.
Okay. I think I'll put put them all separately. Okay. All those in favour for recommendation 1, let me note the report.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. And number 2, I won't read it out. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Option 3, and it's the one with option 2 in it as described with the additional services. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Division?
Sorry, it's. Oh, no.
That's the one factoring option 2, isn't it? That's what you just said.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then option
Yep.
3.
Yeah, Michael.
Yep.
You're voting for recommendation 3?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkes? Yes. Councillor Hope?
No.
Councillor Callagher?
No.
Councillor Laws?
No.
Councillor Malcolm?
No.
Councillor New?
Aye.
Councillor Robertson?
Yes.
Councillor Scott?
Yes.
Councillor Wilson?
No.
7-5. Oh, 6-5. Yes, you're right.
Carried.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was just
6-5
counting 5
carried.
and just
Five against.
Yep. 6 in favour, 5 against. Motion carried. Recommendation 4. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Recommendation 5. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Yes.
Carried.
She was good situation.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gavin. We will now break for lunch, and our public excluded item, we will start at 1 o'clock. So that's all workable, Guy. So this concludes. Yep.
And then public excluded after that. Come into public after.
Yes. Yeah, no, cool. Thank you, everyone.
Can I ask you a question?